Our next section is a sector expert interview, and I'm delighted to introduce Walter Kling, President of the International Association of Waterworks for the Danube Catchment area, also known as the IAWD, which is surely wrong, because surely it should be the IAWDCA, or IDAWACA for short. Anyway, joking apart, Walter has been one of the wise guiding minds for the water sector for the past few decades. He has incredible insights and experience which he generously shares, and does so in a way which is uplifting and informative. Now, as you'll hear in a second, I met Walter at an event last year where we talked about water usage and how the water footprints of individuals need to be all-encompassing. It's not just about what you use in the shower or when you clean your teeth. Now, here's a segment from the discussion that we recently had.
Walter, wonderful to be here with you. Thank you for taking the time for this call. For those who don't know you, I think it's worth saying that you trained as an environmental engineer sort of 30, 40 years ago. You've then spent a whole career working around the Danube area, 37 years at Vienna Waterworks, and over 20 years with heavy involvement, in particular at the board level with the IWA, all of which we're going to talk about in a minute. But I wanted to start because when we last met face to face, it was in Singapore last year, and we had a fascinating conversation about water footprints. Walter, can you expand upon what we talked about when we last met, if you can remember when we last met back in June?
Well, first, Piers, many thanks for this invitation to join you in this conversation. And yes, beside my work for Vienna Water and maintaining the supply of the city of Vienna, it's been always in my interest to stay connected with the university and learn about latest results and researches. And one of these interesting things was that at the University of Life Science here in Vienna, there was to try to calculate a water footprint of people in average living in Austria. And the interesting thing is that we learned that your daily consumption is not only what you get from your supplier. Your daily consumption can be calculated in a way that it concludes your whole lifestyle: the food you eat, the things you buy, mobility, everything. It's a very complex try to do this, but it comes out, instead of talking about a water consumption of 135 liters a day by your supplier, you are using 4,700 liters per person just to get your clothes, to buy food, to eat, to go to restaurants, to travel, to do all the thing which is connected to your lifestyle. And I think it's worth to look at such researches. It might not be an exact calculation, but it gives you an idea about the range where we are with water consumption.
And of course, the key thing there is, like you say, it's not a precise calculation, but it's the order of magnitude. So it's going from 100 litres to 4,000 litres. Whether it's going from 100 litres to 2,000 or 100 litres to 8,000, it's a massive order of magnitude jump. And it's more than just what I'm using in the shower. It's how much water was used getting my orange onto the plate that I then eat. I think it's incredible, and it was the only time I'd heard this sort of work going on, or at this.
And I think also one of the interesting points of this study that in average, 70% of this water consumption you're dealing with is happening outside your country. So only 30% is a consumption related to the environment you're living in. The rest is something you produce with a water need outside even your region, different continents. So, and to have this in mind gives you probably a little bit different thinking of how to deal with resources. And we discussed this with kids. We discussed this with adults, just to give them a sense of how important water is. And we will have now in March World Water Day a good reason to think about it.
Excellent. Well, and of course, we're used to talking about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions with carbon. It's the same thinking that we now should apply to water. You know, the scope 3 emissions of what's embedded in the infrastructure we build when we build carbon, when we're talking carbon footprint, we should think about that same embedded water footprint on the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the transport we take. Really interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing that. And that, just to be clear, that was from the University of Life Science in Vienna. That's where the main research came from.
German called BOKU. It's always the short version for this well-known university. But if you go to the internet, you easily find the University of Life Science and this research here in Vienna.
Now, I said in the introduction that you spent 37 years at the Waterworks of Vienna, or Vienna Waterworks, I think it's officially known as. Tell me, 37 years, that's 1986, 87 to
Correct.
Give me a highlight and a low light. Give me one of both. I want a highlight and a low light.
Well, actually, I think professional life in water is more full of highlights. But just to give you an idea of the range, when I was still in the early 80s at university, I was proud to have a little Texas Instrument calculator to do my work. So this is when I went the first time to the office of Vienna Water. It was at the time where we had our first we had our first computers. So the whole range of digitalization, which we saw over the decades of 40 years now, happened in the sector and tremendously changed everything. We are much more efficient, we have much more knowledge, and we build on this knowledge. We still care about the resource of water and make it in the best way available to our customers. I think one of the critical points probably is when I look also to my work, which I do in the Danube region, and see the political change which we had in the early 90s when the Iron Curtain raised and the former communist countries moved into the middle of Europe, and suddenly economy, political circumstances changed. And this was a big challenge. This was lots of interesting.
You were 3 years into the role when the Iron Curtain fell, weren't you? 89?
This was 89 till 93. And this was one of the probably more problematic points that I witnessed. When former Yugoslavia broke apart, and suddenly you saw a civil war happening in this region, and you saw even on the second conflict with around the Kosovo with Serbia, you saw cruise missiles flying into bombing in Serbia and Belgrade, and I was so much aware that I will never see a war happening. And even when this happened, I was sure this might be the only one time. So don't be too scared. And looking what's happening now, this is really something which makes me much concerned. That is that the peace we had after the Second World War seemed to last forever. And I'm really wondering and disappointed that this is not lasting forever.
That's a sobering.
And it affects also our business with the association in the Danube region. We also worked in Ukraine, so we have been affected by the things happening in Yugoslavia. We've been affected by this, so this is something which touches me deeply.
As I said at the start, Walter has been a key guiding mind for the water industry, and he's played a leadership role in key organisations such as the IWA for many decades. He also happens to be one of the nicest people that you'll ever meet. Now, the key facts that I'm taking away from that interview is that, firstly, 70% of your water footprint comes from outside your region. And secondly, that your actual water footprint is probably 20 to 40 times bigger than you would think if you just took the reading from your local water meter. Walter, thank you for your input and your insights.